Barry Smith takes a trip down the holiday line from Waterloo to Exmouth to recall memories of his childhood days in The Train Now Departing.
Okay, so it's another crowd at a railway station, except that this crowd isn't even going anywhere.
You'll be back here, that'll be, well, roughly there, that Union Jack.
This is Woking 150, an event to celebrate 150 years of the London South Western Railway. Everyone was delighted, well, fairly delighted, to pay homage to the old days, to steam in particular, even if it just shunted back and forth. 60,000 people came to record the past, each in their own style, with or without a child to make the task that much easier. As for children, who may or may not want to become engine drivers these days, they could get to grips with simple, non-electronic joys. Once upon a time, Barry Smith was a small boy, fascinated by trains, and he too queued to see a piece of the past he used to know so well. The high spot of his early life was the annual holiday, by steam, of course, down to Devon, of which the journey was the very best part of all.
Well, I've come here today because it's the first time that I've seen so many Southern steam engines since they went in, 21 years ago, 1967. It really is a marvellous sight. It's working steam engines here. Most of them are Southern Railway, in the Southern region. And I'm amazed, actually, there are so many people here today. I mean, there are literally thousands and thousands. It's absolutely marvellous. I must admit, I never thought I'd see the day again when I see so many Southern Railway engines. Lovely sight. It all brings it all back, quite honestly. It's absolutely fabulous. Of course, one of the great attractions for me here today is the City of Wells, and that is running on a steam special from Salisbury down to Yeovil in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That should be hauling it. It should be a lovely sight. I'm looking forward to that.
Life on the ocean wave today is life on the same old jam-packed 832, and it's possible not to see the romance of a railway terminus. But the railway terminus has seen it all. The comings and goings, the partings, the sweet sorrow, as well as the fairly miserable sorrow, and all the other kinds. For the young Barry Smith, it was all joy. And his particular heaven started at Waterloo, where the Southern Railway began its journeys to the coast for holidays when the sun always shone throughout the stay.
Well, there we are, Waterloo Station. Things have changed a lot since I was here 40 years ago. No steam, very little noise, plenty of people still. fabric still here. Let's have a look. Waterloo, it's an incredible place now, I think. I mean, you could virtually eat a meal off the floor. It's so clean. And it's more or less like a supermarket. I mean, you walk in here and look around. You can go and get some spectacles over there. You can have those made while you wait. And you can walk down there and buy a pair of underpants. Full chemist over there. I mean, selling everything under the sun. You've got fast food all the way around here. You can have a meal. You can go and sit down there and have a drink. I mean, the whole thing's changed so completely. I like it. Yes, I do. I like Waterloo now.
It's important to remember the rivalry of the old lines and how the London and South Western Railway listed its destinations much like battle honours in some war. For those of us today, it is a bit odd that you can go to the South West either via the Southern from Waterloo or the Western from Paddington. But it was a war in a way, with both sets of tracks capturing new land, awkwardly meeting at Exeter, and then conquering different parts of Cornwall. For Barry Smith and all the others, 11 a.m. was the famous hour when the Atlantic Coast Express pulled out of Waterloo. There are still small Barry Smiths today, still hooked on trains even if they are just diesel, and still getting down the numbers. So will they become sentimental about the old days, the late 1980s, when they grow up and trains no longer look as they do today?
One didn't have a worry in the world then. But I'd like to go back knowing what I do now, and then have another go at it, just to see if it's at all possible. I have my doubts, actually, because we don't have the steam, although there's going to be some steam further down the line. It'll be exciting, without a doubt, because all the various places that used to have engine sheds for a start, I don't know what's there now. It's going to be an exciting journey, yes. I'm going to look forward to it, I think.
Past 9 elms for a start, now all fruit and veg, and it used to be railway sheds. So will this nostalgic journey work, this attempt to relive a little of the past with so much change? Gantries without the old signals, and rain instead of sun. Ah well, there's always Ian Allen, and the Trainman's Bible, which he wrote.
Yes, Ian Allen, his ABCs, I mean, they really were marvellous. Very, very difficult to get hold of in the war. In fact, they were rationed. You really had to know somebody to get hold of one of these. I've kept them all. I've still got them to this day with all my original numbers in and such like, and I occasionally look at them as well, and I find them fascinating reading. Nowadays you can go down to Exeter and back in a day, and you don't think anything of it really, but in those days it was a huge adventure. So you started off from Waterloo with all that atmosphere of Waterloo, and it was a whole day's trip. It took a long, long time to get there. It wasn't until tea time. Whereas nowadays, as I say, people go off every weekend now. But when I was a child, it was the one holiday in the year, really. It was an adventure, yes, without a doubt. You didn't really know what you were going to see, quite honestly. It was all new. Even though you'd done it in the past several times, it was still all very, very new. You used different things to look at, and there's always things to see. This was the great thing. Plenty of railways and plenty of locos all over the place.
Past proper signals in the old days, and full steam ahead for the first stop out of Waterloo for Salisbury. For the young Barry, it was all quite magnificent.
Salisbury was a lovely place because virtually in those days everything changed engines there. So you got sort of two engines for the price of one, shall we say. One came off and another one came on. And a lot of those engines were for Exmouth Junction. And the Exmouth Junction engines in those days didn't work through to Waterloo. So they were quite rare engines. So it was a lovely place. There was plenty of smoke and steam and noises and all sorts of things there. And of course, everything stopped there.
So what's left of the past? Well, there's still the old water tank which supplied the thirsty engines. The coaches are still parked as formerly, and the station entrance smacks of that different age. And so do other bits and pieces scattered here and there from a period when there seemed to be more time to make such things as pleasing arches. But for those making the excursion, there's nothing a station can provide quite so attractive as a locomotive. Although, horror upon horrors, this proved not to be the City of Wales as had been promised, but an alien machine from quite another line.
It was a shame, really, because there was the City of Wales at Woking. I've been pulled behind it years and years ago, and I was most disappointed to find that it wasn't running. And also, of course, it wasn't a Southern Railway engine, or ex-Southern Railway engine. We're talking about this LMS goods engine. It wasn't even a passenger engine. So, quite honestly, I was horrified when I saw that. It's still steam, I know, but to me, it wasn't quite right.
Be that as it may, Salisbury was, and is, the gateway to further west, even if the LMS, for heaven's sake, was on the southern. But this was emphatically phase 2 of the sentimental journey, out of Salisbury and onwards to the west.
I suppose when I stood on Clapham Junction that day back in 1967 and saw the last steam trains on the Southern, I never really thought I'd travel west of Salisbury behind a steam loco. And yet here we are today. Okay, we've got the wrong engine. It's an 8F, a Stanier 8F, which never ever came onto this section of line. I've been back through my records and I can't find one at all. Been into Salisbury and they came up to Templecombe, of course, on the Somerset and Dorset. But actually on this stretch of line, I think we could say that this is unique. Nevertheless, it's steam. You know, I mustn't complain too much. We haven't got that lovely noise of a bullied up at the front there, which we used to have. We haven't got that lovely hooter. That lovely bullied hooter. We've got a Stanier.
Bullied is from Oliver Bullied, the famous railway engineer, as against the Stanier of Sir William Stanier, also famous railway engineer, and both men made certain their hooters weren't the same.
But of course, things have changed outside here, outside the window, where are the telephone wires. If you look outside here, there's nothing at all. Dipping and up they went, down and up and down. But the smells there, yes, I mean, that doesn't change at all. It's good coal, plenty of smoke, smuts in your eyes if you're not very careful. So we've got all that back, and that was part of childhood. I don't know about going back 40 years, but I've gone back quite a few years in this today, yes. Yes, that smell, that was the joy. I always envied the firemen in those days. I must admit, I'd love to have been an engine fireman. I really would. Family wouldn't let me. This is the trouble. A friend of mine 2 doors away, he was a locomotive fireman, but parental pressures, unfortunately, prevented me from doing that. But I wouldn't mind having a go up front now behind this stanchion. It's back-breaking work, absolutely, shoveling coal. But I mean, in those days, they did it hour after hour, ton after ton they were shoveling. Tremendous job it must have been. But nowadays, I mean, when steam came back again, they in fact had to have 2 firemen. One just couldn't cope with shoveling the coal, which is not surprising, because they were just sitting down most of their working lives. Whereas now they've suddenly got to shovel coal, so of course it was very, very hard work. Going back to those old days, it must have been absolutely horrendous up in the front there, because there was the noise, there was a continuous vibration, swaying about, trying to keep your foot, and also trying to shovel coal in through that fairly small fire hole door. When you're doing about 70 or 80 miles an hour and you've got to shovel a ton an hour, it's very, very small. I'd love to have done it, I must admit. I wish I'd had the chance.
Can't have been any easier inside the tunnels, when smoke, smuts, vibrations, speed and darkness were all part of the job. For those today who long for steam, they should try and remember the tunnels when smoke became a sorry substitute for nice fresh air. After Yeovil, in the old days, would come branch line country on the southern, with many connections leading to the sea, practically all of which have gone today. So far as the steam excursion was concerned, Yeovil was now the end of the line, causing yet another change of trains. Only this time, for Barry Smith trying to find the past, it was back to diesel and modern times. But at least there was a line and a train of sorts to carry him on his nostalgic voyage. For the young Barry, Yeovil and Dorset with Devon still to come was simply more excitement.
I think we're very fortunate actually to be travelling on this line, because if one looks at the beaching proposals and on the maps, there's going to be nothing west of Salisbury. There's a regular service, of course, from Waterloo to Exeter, but it's a shame really, because we've got so much single track here now. Beaching had to come about, there's no doubt about it. If it wasn't beaching, it would have been somebody else. It was a shame for the enthusiast, of course, because we lost out. All these lovely branch lines all went, but coming to reality, which I think one has to do, it had to come about.
And what came about was the closing of branch lines as to Lyme Regis from Exmouth. But of course the closing of each branch meant its connecting junction was that much less busy. So no longer do trains puff up and down from Lyme Regis as they used to do.
You've got the Lyme Regis branch, which in fact is frequently worked by just one coach and an engine. So you've got straight away a staff of 3. And then, of course, you have the stations which were fully staffed with station master and ticket collector and porter. And, of course, there was signalman all the way down the line. The track itself was maintained virtually to mainline standards, in excellent condition. And looking all round, it was quite tremendous, the amount of staff that they had on these lines. So really, it was no wonder that they went to the wall, because it's only in the summer because a branch like the Lyme Regis branch fully worked.
At Axminster, it's no longer all change for Lyme Regis. It's just get off if you want Axminster, and the car you left in its car park, and the town, and of course the carpet factory, or a bit more travelling. Fennyton used to be Sidmouth Junction before they cut off the line to Ottery and Sidmouth. Now it's just Fennyton. And memories, as for Alan Powell, who works here in the family tradition.
My grandfather was a signalman here back in the last century, and I had an uncle who was a signalman here, not my father, but then I took on in the 1950s. When I joined, I counted up a total of about 16 altogether. Station master, 3 signalmen, 2 booking clerks, 2 shunters, a couple of crossing keepers, and 4 of us on the platform. Not all on at once, of course. People would come in from all the villages, 3 or 4 miles around, to get trains away. And it was very much a railhead, so it was really lively then. On a summer Saturday, you would probably have a train going through about every quarter of an hour, some of them stopping, some not. And of those that stopped, you had connections to the branch line to Sidmouth and Exmouth, quite busy generally. Well, now, of course, it's a very scaled-down sort of operation. We get about half the trains that go through stopping here. We cater for a steady trickle of passengers, not a flood these days.
First stop on the branch line was the station, now gone, for the market town of Ottery St Mary. Well, Ottery still lives, but not its old railway line leading either to Sidmouth or Budleigh Salterton.
The closures had to come sometime because there was so much opposition from the bus services, and there was a very good bus service between Ottery and Exeter and Huntingdon and Axminster, that it was a foregone conclusion. And with the goods traffic gone from the station, I mean, that was, you understand, that was took up by the road transport system, which was cheaper, more economical, and the trains seemed to get so far behind with their service that it was a foregone. There was a lot of controversy and a lot of sympathy for the railway, but and the council, I was on the town council, urban council at that time, and there was a lot of talk, and in fact there was meetings held with the railways and the bus services to say how many buses was going to connect up with the railways, and you'd have a marvellous service to Ottery and Mary and such like, but never came about. I mean, these promises was never carried out.
So what about those branches? Jeff Vinter of the Railway Ramblers.
Unfortunately, because the railways were in a very difficult financial circumstance when these closures took place, the lines were sold off, sometimes for very small sums of money, without any view to their reuse whatsoever. So nowadays, the land is in a very fragmented state. If 25 years ago we had had a coordinated policy for the reuse of these abandoned railway lines, we could have ended up with a fabulous network of green lanes suitable for cyclists, walkers, interconnecting all over the country. You will have been in a position where, for example, you might have travelled to somewhere like Barnstaple, walked out to Ilfracombe or Bideford, Torrington. Walking down old railway lines is like passing through a gateway into a lost way of life, into a past world when lives were regulated not so much by getting things done as fast as possible, but by the measured coming and going of the branch line train. You find yourself in cuttings hewn out by sweat and toil with pick and axe, which have now become private nature reserves, unknown to all but the few people like us who pass through them. Walking down an old railway line isn't just a matter of striding out with 6 or 7 friends and hoping for the best. You've got to get involved in finding out who owns the land, tracking them down, getting permission and all the rest of it. So it's quite a major undertaking. It can involve a lot of letter writing or perhaps travelling around actually knocking on doors. In itself, that's quite interesting. It becomes extremely so if you should knock on the door of an old station and discover, for example, that the former station master still lives there.
For the young Barry Smith, unaware that a Dr. Beeching and hard times for the railways were both looming, the impending arrival of Exeter held an excitement which had nothing to do with its cathedral, but everything to do with the majesty of its loco shed.
Oh, Exmouth Junction. Now, that really was a shed. I love Nine Elms and, of course, Salisbury, but Exmouth Junction had a ring about it, I think, Exmouth Junction, because you could see the whole yard as you went by on the train. And, of course, trains were beginning to slow down then because you were getting close to Exeter. You didn't roar past at 60 or 70 miles an hour and see nothing. And there were lines of engines, everything. So it was a lovely place, gorgeous building.
It was at Exeter that the two competing railway lines, the one from Waterloo and the other one from Paddington, met and still do meet. And on Barry Smith's journey, Exeter Central was the place for finding yet another train.
Of course, here at Exeter Central, I changed trains here to get the branch line down to Exmouth in this bay here, which I don't think is used anymore now for the branch line trains. But the great thing, of course, about this branch is that it still survives. It's the only surviving branch off the main line now from Waterloo to Exeter. All the others have gone. Well, after this station, of course, it'll be the end of the line, Exmouth. I don't know what I'm going to find there. There's a station there, but what sort of station, I just can't imagine. We'll soon find out anyway. It doesn't take all that long to go down the line.
Well, the River Ex may still be there, but the old M7 tank engines have long since vanished from this lovely piece of line.
Exmouth station was a lovely little station. I honestly can't remember the full details of it, but it seemed, if I remember, there were about 3 platforms, and of course it had an engine shed, which is always an attraction in itself. It was a very small one-road engine shed which housed the loco off the branch. It always seemed a very busy station. I think there must have been freight because there were goods yards there, so there was obviously a freight service in there bringing coal and such like. It was a lovely little station. I just hope that it hasn't been altered too much. Well, here we are, journey's end, Exmouth, sunny Exmouth. But what a lot of changes. Engine shed's gone, the yard's gone, the station's gone, lovely station, gone. When I came here, it was never like this, for a start, pouring with rain. Well, I don't think it was. It was always sunny, glorious Devon. I mean, this was the adverts in those days. It was gorgeous.
Apart from its wonderful stretch of coastline, golden beaches and clear blue seas, Exmouth has a lovely river.
I would call it a disaster, quite honestly. I mean, I'm absolutely appalled at what they've done to this station. No, it's not I don't think it's a good experience at all, quite honestly. I don't think I'd recommend this to anybody to come back. I think I prefer to remember it as I did 40 years ago, with the smell of steam and as it was.
As we take our last look at Exmouth and remember our journey through the Raleigh country, pride mingles with regret at having to leave it all too soon.
it's more than 20 years since the last scheduled steam service on the mainland, the Victorian Steam Railway has continued to provide a regular passenger service on the Isle of Man, as you can see in the train now departing next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And for an evocative and nostalgic look back to the days of steam, you can do no better than buy this BBC book based on the series.